So welcome to my YouTube channel. That's what we call The Good Life. It's mid-year, so mid-summer, and it's a really exciting time because it's really warming up, and I'm going to be showing you some things that you can be sowing in the month of July, and I'm also going to be giving you my top 5 trusted things that I'm going to be sowing, and I'm also going to be showing you how I sow them and some top tips so you get a bumper crop this year. So to start off with some of the things that you can be sowing, so Florence fennel, the one that grows into a bulb, that's a really lovely thing to sow. I've already started some of that off. It's the one that swells out into a nice bulb. It's really lovely in a whole host of recipes, risottos, salads, omelettes, all sorts of wonderful things. You can direct sow or you can sow into module trays, it's up to you. You can also sow some chicory, that's another thing you can be sowing, again direct sow or sow into module trays, all depending what you've got. You can grow that as microgreens, you can put that in salads, you can cook it in all sorts of wonderful dishes. There's a whole host of herbs that you can sow if you haven't already. Some are my favourites and of which I've sown already, and I will be successional sowing some more I'm sure this year. Basil, parsley and coriander. Again, so incredibly versatile for all sorts of dishes, and far nicer to grow it yourself rather than having to buy it every time you need it. I know it's a bit of a groovy one, but turnips, the good old-fashioned turnip, really simple just to direct sow into the ground this time of year, and again, you know, you'll be grateful for it in the later months to put in all sorts of stews and casseroles and soups and all sorts of wonderful things. One of my favourites that I always grow every year is some beetroot. I've got some lovely goldeneye there, but beetroot comes in all different shapes and colours, so pick what you like the best. Again, you can direct sow that into the ground now, very versatile. I've made brownies with it, I put it in a curry last year. You can just boil it, pickle it, put it in salad, an incredibly wonderful thing and tastes far better than anything shop bought. I don't hate pickled beetroot, but it can put a lot of people off. You can do so many more things with it. You can be starting off some more Calabrese and some other brassicas this time of year, like this, pak choy. There's all sorts of cabbages you can start off that are really worthwhile doing. I've got some already, but again, if you've not started that off, you can do that. Something that's worth successional sowing is all sorts of salad. I've got some frilly leaf there. I prefer the cut and come again lettuces, so frilly leaf is a really good one. There's lots of different types, the salad bowl, but if you like to grow heart lettuces, that's fine. But the reason I like frilly leaf and cut and come again is exactly what it says on the tin. It keeps coming and you don't have to pick it when it's formed a heart because it will just keep coming, and I just find it lasts a lot longer, and the slugs tend to not like it quite so much as well. Now moving on to some things that I'm actually planting myself, and I'm now going to give you some top tips on how I plant them. We'll start doing that now. So here come my 5 top vegetables that I'm going to be planting. Now radish is something I'm going to be planting today. It's incredibly nice to grow yourself. They pack a punch far more than anything you'll get in the supermarket, and of course it'll be grown naturally. So let's get started on how I plant my radishes. Now I don't know about anybody else, and if anyone's got any comments, please do put them in the description. I get an awful lot of flea beetle when I grow my radishes, and I also find that they all come on and on at once and I never get to eat them all in one go, so I plant smaller amounts. So I do them in a pot because I genuinely find that the flea beetle doesn't attack them so much when I do them in a pot. If anyone's got any other ideas, then obviously please do let me know, but this has been the way that I found much better. So I'm just popping some compost in here like so, nice and easy. So I won't fill it right up to the top, I'll do it to about the rim, so like that. I mean, I've even covered it with Enviromesh and all sorts of things, but it seems to make absolutely no difference with radish. So I filled it up to about there, as you can see. So I'll pop that on the table there, take my gloves off. So these are a very basic radish. So I must admit, I wasn't terribly organised. I thought I'd bought radish. Turned out I bought radish salad leaf, so I had to rush out and get some more. I'm sure these will do the job beautifully. So if you just put them out on your into the hand and try and just spread them as thinly as you possibly can. I mean, it's not Doesn't have to be exact. You can obviously thin them out. If you do them too thickly, I do find that they don't grow as well. So just to kind of bear that in mind. It's not like something like spring onions where you can put them in quite thickly and then separate them. If you put them in too thickly, they seem to suffer a little bit, but it's perfectly okay to do a few more and then just thin them out because they might not all germinate. So I think that's probably enough there. So I've got a nice amount in there. I'll try and put them back in the packet without throwing them everywhere. Sometimes when I do things like this, I find it easier to hold the packet over the pot. So if I do drop in at least I go back in the packet. And then I generally cover with vermiculite. You can cover, if you haven't got any vermiculite, it's fine. Just a very thin covering of compost. But I really like this. I find that the small seeds germinate much better. It's a really handy thing I buy myself a really big bag of it and I put it into a container. If you've not got any vermiculite already and you would like to get some, I know it's not the easiest thing to get, but you can just order a great big bag off of Amazon. I'll put a link up on the screen there if you want to get some, and I will put some in the description. Obviously, I do make a little bit of money out of it. If you do buy things off of my Amazon shop, I have to let you know that, otherwise Amazon get annoyed with me if I don't tell you. But yeah, it is a jolly good thing to have, and I find I get better germination. So I'll just gently flatten that out, so with very gentle covering either with soil or the vermiculite. And that's my radishes. I will give those a water in a minute, and obviously you've got to keep it moist but not soggy. So the next thing I'm going to plant are some spring onions, and again I find spring onions germinate far better and then I actually transplant them out. So the difference with the radishes is the radishes will stay in there and I will pick them when they get big enough. With the spring onions, I start them off in a little tray like this and then I transplant them. It doesn't have to be a tray like that, it can be a little round one, whatever you've got, but I just want to use the minimal amount of compost for this because they're not going to stay in there. With these, the radishes are going to stay in there, so they're going to need more watering, more looking after, more root growth. But with these, as soon as they get to a certain size, they'll be going out in the ground. So, and I find a little tray like this is enough. Again, successional sowing these is really handy, so you've got them at all different stages. I've already got a few of these up at my allotment already growing. You can even overwinter spring onions as well, which is something a lot of people don't realise you can do that. They just get a little bit bigger. Obviously eventually they will go to seed, but you don't have to. You can pick a spring onion as soon as it's the size that you want to pick it to use it, but you can leave it in the ground to last a little bit longer if you want to. The choice is yours. So that's a top tip. You probably didn't realise that you can just leave them in the ground. I only learnt that because my father-in-law used to do it, or still does it in fact. So then again, just gently sprinkle them. You can be a little bit more generous with the spring onions because you're going to thin them out anyway, and they're quite robust. They're a little bit like leeks in the fact that, if I'm honest, I don't think you could probably put too many in. Well, you could put too many in, but you can be a bit more generous with how many you put in there. So there we go. And the same thing with that. I will pop a little bit of vermiculite over the top, like so. And I'll give that a little bit of a water in a minute. Spring onions was number 2. As we move on to top vegetable number 3, you've got 2 choices here. So you can either be putting in kale or chard. Because both of these, to put another lot of these in, if you might not have put any in, or you might put some in already, it just gives you another stage so they last a little bit longer, because the ones that you've got in the ground at the moment might go over a little bit or get a little bit tough. To put some fresh ones in now is really handy. Now I'm going to be starting these off at home because I'm starting to run out of room up at the allotment. There's a couple of bits I will be putting in up at the allotment, but I'll start these off in module trays, and then when I've dug something else out, like my potatoes or something else, and these are a little bit bigger, I'll be putting them in their place. Now the method for planting both of these is very similar. So I'm going to be doing chard because I want a little bit more chard, but you could do exactly the same for the kale. So like I say, choose which one's that's best for you. So this is vegetable number 3. So I've got a little module tray here which I'm going to fill up with compost. So let me pop my gloves on. It's worth wearing gloves if you want to keep your hands looking nice and soft. I think I have quite nice nails and hands, if I don't mind saying so myself, even though I do a ridiculous amount of gardening, because I kind of wash my hands, I look after them, I put almond oil on them to keep my nails nice, and I try and wear gloves whenever I can, but there are some jobs where you just have to get your fingers dirty. So let's press that down a little bit. So we've got 6 little module trays here. So let's get the seed out. There we go. So I'm doing something called rainbow chard, which is one of my favourites. You can get just green chard, but one of the lovely things is the lovely colour that it produces, and I do believe the different colours do taste slightly different. So it's an excellent addition to salads and stir fries and all sorts of weird and wonderful things. I do use chard probably once or twice a week. So I'm going to pop 3 seeds in. Like so, all depending how big your module trays are. They're quite reliable to germinate, so I'm just going to poke them in. With these, because they're a slightly larger seed, you can just cover these with a little bit of compost. So that's the chard seeds in the tray there. So like I said, just sprinkle a little bit. You could just gently poke them in as well, the little seeds with these. Like I said, I would use compost with these because they are a little bit chunkier, so they can take it. It's just the smallest seeds where the vermiculite is quite useful. It lets a little bit light in, they're just more likely to germinate. And someone recommended it to me some years ago, and it's done what I need it to do. So those are there. Obviously, don't forget to label. We always think we will remember, and often we don't. Now, the chard and the spring onions I'll probably, well, I'll leave it all in here initially to germinate, but once the radishes have germinated I will lift them outside. These will most likely stay in here until they're ready to transplant on, but I might start to weather them a little bit outside once I get ready to plant them. So even though it's warm, it's still a good idea to acclimatise them to where they're going to go. Now whenever you water seeds, always water with a rose, because otherwise it can make quite a mess. It's quite hard doing it from a height actually. But if you water seeds without the rose on, they'll just splurge everywhere, and they won't be where you put them basically. So to use a rose like this is much handier, and indeed would be better if I was doing this outside, but I'm just doing this for the camera. So now we're going to head up to the allotment and I'll show you the things that I'm going to be planting up there, items number 4 and 5. So we're now at the allotment. I'm a little bit hot and sweaty because we've been digging and weeding and getting everything ready for you. Vegetable number 4 is carrots. And now this time of year, it's perfectly okay to sow carrots, but you want to be quite choosy with what you're sowing. You want ones that are fast growing. So I've got a selection of ones that would work at this time of year. I've got Chantenay, we will flash this up on the screen. I've got Chantenay, I've got Nantes, and I've also got Amsterdam Forcing 3. Now all these grow quite quickly, so they're perfectly okay to put in this time of year. Now whenever I put carrots in, obviously mark a row so you can do a straight line. I only ever use a bit of string with a cane, nothing fancy. You can either use a trowel obviously I've dug it over, I've raked it. You can either use a trowel or you can use a dibber just to do some like little trowels in the ground, so we can pop the seed in. Now something I always do, and I've actually watered the ground a little bit already, is when you're planting seed, even if it's not as hot as it is today, unless the ground is completely sodden, I generally always put a little bit of water along the row where I'm going to plant. So I've done a little kind of like a little trough there where the seeds are going to go. You know, you don't do it very deep because carrot seeds are very, very tiny, so they don't need to be buried down deep. And I just gently water along the row, like so. Very, very simple, but it just means that the seeds go on a nice bit of moist soil, and it's going to make them far, far easier to germinate. You'll find at this time of year they will grow a heck of a lot easier. Now I know that my soil is a little bit clayey underneath. I've dug it over, but it's not as soft as I would like. So something like the little Chantenay ones that grow quite small is absolutely perfect for this. So I'm going to do 2 small rows next to each other. I only put 1 piece of cane in because it just makes it easier. And I'll just gently and as evenly as I can sprinkle them across. I don't worry too much because you can always thin them out if they're a little bit thick. Some people really worry about it, but I never have done. I pick the bigger ones first and I let the smaller ones fill out. But if they are a little bit too thick, you can always thin them out. It's perfectly okay. So just like so, very, very easy, very, very quick. The hardest bit is actually preparing the ground and getting it ready and digging it over. When you're planting carrots, if you see any stones or sticks or anything a little bit hard, do remove them, because that's what makes them fork. Everyone says it's using too much fertiliser, but some well-known gardeners have been known to say that it's more likely a stone that will cause it to fork as opposed to putting too much fertiliser on. And my father-in-law would quite often put what I would think far too much fertiliser down and get the most amazing carrots, and maybe there's something in it. Again, comments in the description if you know any more about that, because you possibly know more than I do. Now once you pop the seeds in the ground, either rake it over or just pop your gloves on and just gently move the soil over onto the seeds like so. The rake's okay, and I do use it sometimes, but sometimes you've got more control when you just push the soil over with your fingers, if I'm honest with you. I end up raking it everywhere sometimes when I do the rake, but the choice is yours. Getting a decent pair of little soft rubber gloves that you can just get out for jobs like this, and again, if you've got any clumpy bits, you've got more control with your fingers when you brush it over. So there we go, nice and simple. We will be moving on to item number 5 in a minute, one of my favourites, and I'm sure it will be yours too. So let's cover this up. Like I say, any bits of grass, any tufty bits, just take them out so that the carrots grow nice and easily through. Now this is the important bit. When you water seeds, water with a rose on, because if you do it without a rose, the seeds will absolutely splay everywhere. So if you've not got a rose, it's very, very worth doing that. Give it a really good water, and I would probably water these every couple of days if possible, if it doesn't rain. Every third day at the very least, but I would try and water these every other day until they germinate. Like I say, unless we get some rain, but we're not scheduled to get any rain in Kent at the moment, but who knows. I think we've had enough rain, but it's amazing how much the ground has hardened off actually over a very short period of time. So the other thing that I do, which I think makes a massive difference to my carrots, and I wouldn't plant carrots without it, is a sheet of Enviromesh. I think you've possibly heard me speak about Enviromesh before. I found it ridiculously effective in keeping the carrot fly, the white carrot fly, off of this. And I get such better carrots as a result. I get this, you can get this off Amazon or garden centres. If you want to order some off my Amazon shop, there will be a link up on the screen, and there will be one in the description as well. But I think, like I said before, it might be a little bit expensive, but once you buy a bit, you'll never throw it away because it is so incredibly durable. I would recommend that you buy the size that you need rather than buying it and cutting it down. That would be my other tip as well, because the first few bits I bought them and cut them down, but it made it quite untidy. After that, I've actually bought the size that I needed for the job that I need, and then just use it each year for the relevant job. So we're now on to the last item. I'm in my little polytunnel, which we made from a broken trampoline. We basically split it in two, pushed the semicircles into the ground, and then put some wooden supports in here. And all I've got on here is a little bit of scaffolding net just to protect it. Now this vegetable doesn't need to be planted in here. I've just put it in here because it'll protect it from the birds. That's the only reason it's in here, and I've got space as well. So that item are peas. Now obviously it can be peas or mange-tous, sugar snaps, whatever you want to do this time of year. And the main thing is, a bit like the carrots, you want to make sure that they're quick cropping. You don't want to be having ones that are going to take too long to come to fruition. And this one, Early Kelvedon Wonder, is exactly one of those ones. It's quite a quick one. I haven't soaked these, but if you have any trouble with germination, you can soak your peas overnight overnight in water and then put them between some damp tissue for a couple of days until you see a sprout, and then you can plant them. But today I haven't had time to do that, if I'm honest, and I'm sure they'll be fine because it's warmed up really lovely. So again, I've dug the ground over, I've given it a bit of water because it is very dry at the moment, and I just use a dibber for this. You can do, you know, you can get a trowel and do a little, you know, a little trough there if you want. But if I'm honest, I find it just as easy to put this in the ground like this and then just to do some dibber holes and then just pop them in. I've got some over the other side and they are climbing across this, but if it's not enough, then I will put some canes in as well. So if you've just got these out on your allotment, you might want to put some, you know, some hazel or some other canes. It doesn't have to be hazel. Everyone bangs on about hazel and it's great if you can get your hands on it. But if you can't get your hands on hazel, then any like little twiggy canes will do, which is what I used when I was at home. So you want them down a little bit deep, but you don't want to dig them down deep as if you're trying to find like Australia or anything. But just pop them in the ground and they'll pop through. And then obviously just cover them with some compost. So I'm going to get the rest of these in and then I'm going to water them in. If you've enjoyed this video and you want to know when you should harvest your crops and what to look out for, our video is up on the screen and you can watch that now.